I had a lot of drops and scraps left over from the last few projects I've done, so I wanted to try to make a cutting board. I can't believe in all the years I've been woodworking, I've never actually made one. I made a chessboard once, which I guess that kind of qualifies as being kind of a cutting board, but this will be the first kitchen implement that I've ever actually made. What I learned, as in all things woodworking, it always looks easier than it really is if you want to do something right. A lot of these pieces are drops from making tapered legs, so I'm trying to get as much material out of them as I can. This is going to be an end-grain cutting board, and it's going to be somewhere between 1.1 to 1.25 thick. So I'm trying to keep up with what's end grain and what's face grain, where to make the cuts. I'm trying to keep the pieces close to 1.25 when they come off the saw and not make the cut in the wrong place. It was kind of starting to blow my mind a little bit. Here you can see some gorgeous end grain on this walnut, and when I saw that, I was pretty excited about what this would look like once it was glued up. I didn't have very much maple that was scrap. Luckily I had a piece of 8/4. I had to work it down some and joint it and plane it a little bit before I could do much with it. I also had some pieces of cherry that had already been planed to 3/4, so these cuts were pretty straightforward. I just ripped them to 1.25 wide and kept on moving. I wanted the border of the cutting board to be strips of walnut. I felt like about a 1/2 inch wide would look good, so I had to plane them down to thickness. This glue up just about wore me out. There were so many pieces to glue and so many parts to keep up with. I was afraid I was going to flip a part in the wrong direction and glue the wrong face, and I almost did a couple of times. So I just started doing them one at a time and loosely assembling them. And I did the board half at a time, and that worked out pretty good. Gluing face grain is a lot different than gluing end grain. The parts are slicker, so they slip and slide and move and become misaligned. So you have to be careful and not over tighten the clamps. This turned out to be a pretty good glue up, but it was pretty messy. I guess I could have done a better job with that. I used a scraper to clean up my mess and knock off all the glue beads before I ran it through the sander, and this did a pretty good job. After a few passes through the drum sander, it cleaned up really nice, and all the high spots were knocked down, and it was really flat, and it looked good. I used the sled to square up the cutting board and cut it to final dimension. I have a sacrificial board against the fence on the sled so I don't blow out the cutting board when the blade passes through. I wanted to have what I guess you would call a finger hold on each end of the cutting board so you could get a hold of it and pick it up easily. To do this, I'm using a 1/2 inch cove bit, and I have a guide fence set up on the router. I think it would probably be pretty tough to do this without a fence on your router, and I'm sure that freehanding it would probably be a train wreck. I felt pretty good how it turned out on this side, so I'll go ahead and flip it over and do the same thing on the opposite side. To knock off the hard edges, I go around it with an 1/8 inch roundover bit. Whenever I do this, I always do the end grain first. That way, if there's any tear out, it gets cleaned up on the adjacent pass. I do this on the top and the bottom of the cutting board, and it leaves a really nice soft edge. I give it a final sanding through all the grits up to 220. The coolest part of the project happens when I put the cutting board in the laser and engrave my logo. Real gentle sanding over the engraving will remove any evidence of burn. This is where I'm in a little bit of uncharted territory because I don't know the best way to finish out a cutting board. So I just buy something off the shelf and apply this oil, and it actually turned out pretty good. But if you have suggestions or experience with this, leave them in the comments below. I think it turned out pretty good for my first try. It's pretty straightforward. It doesn't have over-the-top geometry, which is kind of nice to see. And it's a celebration of Southern Appalachian hardwoods. I know there's a lot of folks who do a much better job of this than I did. In fact, I'm going to leave a link in the description box as someone you need to check out. If you know other people who are worth a mention, leave that information in the comments below. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching.